Hello, everyone. Welcome to the September 14th meeting of sig-auth. Can everybody see the screen? Awesome. Okay, so first discussion topic, we got a number of things lined up in 126. We want to make sure that each has assigners and implementers. All right, so we are tracking assignees here. No implementers.
I don't think that board has a concept of who's implementing versus assigned.
Yeah.
It's sort of, I think that's for the release team, but these are the 7 that we have. So I just wanted to make sure that we had bodies to do the work, because there's 7 almost like entirely brand new keps minus like
at least 3.3.25. I mean, I reviewed the PR to implement that last release. It just didn't make freeze. So
yeah, but the rest are not necessarily easy either.
Okay.
How do you edit this?
That's Nick, right? So I think,
is it just by the, you edit directly on the?
Yeah, it's the issue assignee.
Okay. I can do the review on this. Would you like to help with the review, Mo?
that's fine.
Who is working on the structured config?
See, Max just joined. I believe, Max, you are going to implement this release.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. So I think that one's Max, who is, you can see his GitHub handles there.
Reviewer.
I can edit this one too if people want me to. But since some of the ideas that Max has proposed here were mine, I would want a second set of.
No, that's what you say. This looks amazing. It's like you're proposing exactly what I want.
Yeah.
David, that the OIDC one and the multiple authorization webhooks seemed like it touched a lot of similar things that you and I have thought about. If you want to take one and I'll take the other, that's fine.
I've already added myself to multiple authorization webhooks because I remember I was a strong proponent of that.
Okay, you can put me on the OIDC one if you want.
And I'll go ahead and add myself to, I guess, auth API, since that one's in progress.
Okay.
All right. Page refresh.
The board not auto going. Well, I guess that part does, but yeah, don't expect the board to catch up if you put a label on something. Sadly.
Okay. I thought I added.
What happened there?
I don't know. Nice. Okay. Trust anchor sets.
I can be the. Oh, I can be the assignee. I thought I wasn't a member of the Kubernetes project. Oh, well.
GitHub lets you assign anyone who has interacted with the issue.
Okay. Awesome.
So, who should? Are there any other implementers?
I don't think so.
Who should be the? Who wants to do code review? I'm happy to do code review. It would be great to have someone else as well.
David, you like certs?
I do. I like them a lot. There's a PRR column. I can definitely do the PRR. Can you add me on that?
That would be awesome because I think that was in the 125 release cycle. I was like looking, and it's not totally clear how to like get
Trying to
it.
sign
Yeah.
a PR assignee.
I don't know how to do that on this page. Let me see if I can just select my name.
Yeah, like there's a section for David's PRRs, which is currently empty, which I know isn't going to work out for this release.
Well, I mean, oh, look at that. I've got my first one now. Okay, so I'm signed up for the PRR, but I'm gonna withhold judgment on whether I can sign up for, well, I guess I can sign up for half the reviews. I was gonna say, I
How
don't
did you
know.
sign up for the PR?
I'll do the PRR.
How did you, what was the
Oh.
mechanics?
I clicked the down arrow and I selected myself. Is that wrong?
Do I not have a, I guess
Oh,
I'm not allowed
that
to
is interesting. Mine is different than yours.
Yeah, there's
Ooh.
different OTC policies on these boards.
Ooh, I can change all the columns.
All right. Well, we can figure that out later. Okay, I'll do the code. I'll do the code review.
So last time we talked about this, I think we were still, there was like a lot of debate on the API surface itself. So maybe to hear like, I mean, you can start implementing whenever you have time, but
Well,
maybe
it seems that the KEP needs to be merged before we merge any code, right?
yeah, that's fair too.
Yeah. So let's, we can resolve that on the KEP.
That's fair. Yep.
Okay, everything has at least a reviewer and an implementer now. So Mo should be happy.
And the next step is to make sure that the things that still need KEPs or KEP updates have those open and the reviewers are on those, because we have basically 3 weeks.
Okay. KMSV2, do you want to kick us off with this discussion, whoever?
So I added this. So there's a few topics within the KMSV2 KEP that I wanted to get some feedback on. Do you mind opening the one on rotation? I think that's the one that I wanted to most get feedback on because it's probably the largest bit of it.
Which one is that?
The very last link.
Okay.
So let me introduce this and then I can try to answer. I saw David had some comments, so I think we can have some good discussion. But the gist of this change to the KEP is that it proposes adding a Kubernetes REST API to expose some amount of internal opaque state about each API server into their Kubernetes API so that you could write a controller to drive rotation. And sort of outlines the steps of what a controller would have to do. And I cheated and I was like, I will make a controller that drives the storage version migrator because that does most of what I want to do. I just need to tell it to do it. But I think that's an appropriate use of the storage version migrator anyway. But so the gist is it's basically a status only API. There would be one instance of the resource per API server. And it basically contains a set of hashes that if they're equal, you know everything is the same. If they're not equal, then you know it's not the same.
My questions were about, given an arbitrary KMS plugin, how are you going to get the information to fill in the fields? And
yeah,
I don't remember an API that allows you to get access to all the read key IDs that the KMS plugin understands.
Right. So maybe I need to pick a better name for that field. But so the way that the write key is populated is given a particular group resource. We know we have a set of transformers for it. And this API only really covers KMS v2 because it does assume that KMS v1 and the other approaches are just basically covered by the encryption config hash because they're sort of static. But so the status API in KMS v2 will tell you what key a KMS plugin is currently believing it's going to use. So if you have more than one KMS v2 plugins, the read keys are the ones that those plugins are attempting to use. So maybe read key is the wrong name for that. But so the write key is for a given resource, for the index 0 transformer, if it's KMS v2, what is the key ID that you last saw by looking at status?
Okay, well, that's that new status API. Okay, so I can see how you get the write key.
Mhm.
How does it get the read key again? Because read key, there could conceptually be multiple of them. And I don't see that in the status message.
Right. So read key is the write keys of any other KMS plugins. Right. If you told them to encrypt, it's just that we would never ask them to. It's mostly what they are emitting in their status API. Thinking about it more, I'm wondering if I could just drop the field altogether. Maybe I just don't need that information as part of storage migration.
It doesn't seem like if you think about what we're going to persist, only the entry from the first item in the list really matters for what we're going to persist. If I added or removed subsequent things in the list that I might read from, that should not trigger a storage migration. So I think we only care about changes to the first entry.
Yeah, so I think we could drop that field altogether from this API. I don't think we need it. And I can do that update. So, but do you feel confident on what write key means in this case, David? Is that
yeah, I had just forgotten that it had a separate status. I remembered the key ID coming back in the write information, but
yeah, so one of the changes I'm working on right now is today the KMS transformer, both the v2 and the v1, they cannot detect staleness from the data they're reading from etcd. So one of the things that's going to wire up is the ability for that code to know like what the last status key ID was. So that way, when it decodes data off of disk, it can be like, oh, this one I had to use key 1 with, but I'm supposed to be using key 2 now. So this is stale. So if you're going to do an update of it, I'm going to rewrite it. I'm not going to just use my cached kek, that kind of deal. So it sort of completes it. I mean, you still have sort of like I don't know if it's a race condition or if it's just basically you don't want to run storage migration until your system is all caught up to you, but you can observe when it catches up. There's no harm in doing it early, it's just wasting IO basically. So I guess some other, just at a high level, do folks think it is a good idea to make an entire Kubernetes REST API for this? Mostly because I could not come up with any other way to do it. But
so like including the key ID, or the current key ID in what we use to calculate like what affects storage makes sense. We have storage version hash in discovery already. Is there a reason we couldn't take this additional information like the key ID and like make that part of what we factor in to storage version hash?
so I did ask this same question to SIG API Machinery a while back, and David and others told me that they want to delete that field, so don't use it. So I was like, okay, don't use the field you want to delete. Sounds fair. Also, there was concern about exposing any of this details in the discovery API because that's basically world readable or near world readable.
Yes, I wouldn't want to expose any of the information other than like an opaque, like the stuff affecting storage of this resource has changed, which is what that hash is today.
So the old storage version hash field, the storage version hash field on discovery, I don't think we had any plan to pursue to GA. It's gonna die, I think.
Okay.
The storage version API object, which was its replacement because we thought that we could do a better job with it, would still be open to completion, but there's nobody available to continue working on it. And so that's the one that has an object for each cube API group resource, and then has indications about the storage version, encoding version, and conditions on it per API server.
It seems like those same considerations, like the fact that multiple servers can exist, it seems like that same information is relevant here. Like, should this be looking to augment what got started with that API?
If you look at this PR, it actually deletes the bit that says storage version is the spot to put this and replaces it with this API instead. And the fields do look extremely similar, and the way that the resource instances are managed are extremely similar.
Though it does not, so there would, like on a multi-master scenario, there would only be 3 of these resources. There wouldn't be one per, like the pivot is the API server, not the group resource.
Maybe I misspoke. So like there is an alpha API around internal API server storage config servicing that. And it's per group resource, I think you said, multiplied by API servers serving that resource, right?
Single instance for each group resource with a status region 1 for each API server, so that server-side apply works.
Okay. So it seems like the encryption configuration that applies to that resource is relevant to that API. And so I'm wondering if it would make sense to augment that API, not talking about the storage version hash and discovery.
Right, C line 361 that's been removed in this cap.
Oh.
Or in this cap update.
The API, I see.
Now, I would still say, yeah, I think they probably go together. I think Mo's response at the time and now is likely, well, that's great. If it were there, I would use it, but it does not match the graduation level that I want.
There's actually 2 separate caps, right? API server identity and like storage version API. They're like both alpha.
Okay.
And you, I think, still need to solve API server identity.
So that was going to be my next question. So if you have 3 distinct servers serving Cube API server stuff with encryption turned on, and then you have maybe a couple other aggregated servers that also have encryption, like for their resources, what happens with the API servicing, and how does something like Storage Migrator know like when it should start touching instances of a given resource based on what shows up here? I apologize. Maybe you've already talked about all this in the cap. I haven't read the cap.
So I hadn't thought about the aggregate API server case. I need to think more on that one. But the general API server case is the way this differs from the storage version API is that, or it sort of differs, is that it basically proposes that each API server on startup just makes one of these and they'll get GC'd as they're not updated. So basically, if you have n that match where n is the number of API servers you expect, and they all line up, then you can use them as those identities. But it does not, for example, like the API server identity had like this lease concept and like with some labeling and some other semantics. None of that's present here. It's just you make a resource per API server. If you don't keep updating it, the garbage collector will show up and delete it for you. And so as long as you have the number you expect and they were recently updated, you can use them as basically authoritative for what the API servers believe. And again, if you miss anything, just run another storage migration. It's not like you're putting the cluster in a weird state. It's just that it might just take you longer to converge to the state you wanted. Okay. But yeah, I just wasn't sure if those two distinctly different caps that are kind of related are going to go anywhere. And at this, and like KMSV2 without like rotation is kind of sucky.
I think you'll discover that you need to solve very similar problems for what you're producing.
Right. No, I agree with that. That's why initially I was like, no, I'll use that. And now I'm like, I don't know if I want to use that. So yeah, I mean, I guess I would ask, what do folks think is best? Like, I don't know if I want to take on two entire other caps that are in some undeterministic state to try to make progress on having a good automated rotation story, or at least the capability to do so. Also, I just wasn't sure if having group resource be the pivot was the right approach. Like, it makes sense, I think, for storage version stuff. I just wasn't sure if it made sense for this.
Isn't the configuration for use this KMS plugin logically at the level of a group resource?
I guess it depends on which thing you're trying to do, right? For me, it was like, hey, I have these API servers and this is what they believe to be reality, so I can drive rotation.
But yeah, to know what resources you need to rotate when the thing changes. Like, even if you end up repeating some of the information, like if you say use this key ID for secrets and config maps and, like, I don't know, pods, weirdly. Like, you can denormalize that and say, like, here's the encryption config for pods and here's the encryption config for config maps. I was just trying to understand if we were going to map it to an existing concept like discovery or like the storage version stuff.
And like, you drill down and you figure out, like, why do I have a lease object for my API server ID? Like, that exists so that something like an aggregated API server has the ability to say, I'm present, this is what I'm doing. And you can properly clean them up from one location.
Yeah, I think the aggregated API server case does make this extra messy, because we do need, obviously it needs to work for them too.
Yeah, maybe just think about like the multi-server case and the like even the way you're describing sort of the, if you don't update for a while, garbage collection cleans it up. I mean, that sounds like a lease.
Yeah.
And the aggregated case, think about that. I mean, I know the storage version thing is alpha, but this would also start as alpha. So it's not like you're,
I mean, alpha, and it has been alpha for 2 years. So like, I don't know if I like want to.
So technically it's a level ahead and you can take it to beta this release.
Well, I mean, I guess I would ask, what has kept it from moving, right? Like, other than, yeah, I get maybe there's not people to work on it.
lack of demand for it, lack of priority.
Yeah, it's not Roy, but like Roy, the API machinery dude with the GitHub.
How
Yeah, I think he had a PR for it and then got sucked into something else.
Yeah.
And it never finished.
All right.
Like the thing that, the problems that it was solving were like around storage migration, which is like an annoying technical debt thing, but as long as we never ever delete old API versions, it's like an interesting, it'd be nice to clean this up rather than an urgent thing. And then like small inconsistencies on surfacing new APIs during an upgrade, which is rare and short-lived and like generally resolves itself. So there's just not a lot of demand for it, and it's a thorny issue to work on. So the combination of those two things kept it from progressing.
Yeah, but I think people care more if their data gets encrypted in weird ways that they don't expect.
Right, and so I'm just saying the approach that took seems like it has the skeleton of what you need for this as well.
Okay, fine. I'll go see if I can fight with that and make it
It's at
do.
least worth thinking about it.
Okay, that's fine. All right, I can take that and see what I can come up with. Other items that are related to KMS. Let's see, I can move up to like hot reload, which is the one above this. I think just the open question there is hot reload just going to happen when you upgrade to 126? As you know, it's not merged yet. I haven't reviewed the PR and stuff, but there is a PR that gives us hot reloading of this config. Does anybody have concerns about it just doing that?
If we follow the same pattern we've taken in the past with things like CA bundles, where we only replace the existing configuration when we successfully load a non-empty replacement. Like if your editing process like moves the file somewhere else and then moves into a new file in place, we should never accidentally be like, oh, I guess you wanted to turn off encryption config. So like keep using the successfully loaded one until we get another successfully loaded non-empty one. I don't know, David, what do you think?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
the PR implements the same thing.
Cool.
Like we do check for the, I mean, when we check for the newer one, if we are able to parse the transformer successfully, then only we replace it and store the local copy of it for it to become the next one.
Yeah, then I'm in favor of having hot reload just happen. I think that's what people would expect to have happen.
Okay, that's good. That makes my life easier. I don't have to come up with weird stuff to make that not happen.
How'd you handle closing clients?
Closing which clients?
So if I change the Unix domain socket in encryption config or something like that.
Oh, yeah, the client being the API server. I don't know. I haven't looked. Nilek, what did you do? Did you close those connections and make new ones?
I don't think so.
Okay,
I think I did.
we can fix that. That's fine.
Yeah,
Okay.
we this reminds me a lot of like the dance when you update a CRD and we have to like stop accept or set up the new handler with the new CRD definition, start directing requests to that, let old requests complete via the old handler, and then shut it down.
Right.
To make sure we don't break anything in flight.
Yeah, the beauty of it is I recently wired up a context to that whole thing, so you'll be able to turn it off when you want to turn it off, because previously you just never closed the connection until the API server shut down. So yeah, we have a place to clean this up now. We can wire it up better.
Okay. Make sure we have good tests around like the handoff and not dropping in-flight stuff.
Okay, cool. I guess since we're going backwards, I'll just keep going up. Does anybody strongly oppose adding the ability to parse ** as I really do want to break my register? Please encrypt everything.
Is this a backdoor to also encrypt custom resources?
No, this still won't work for that until Rita is currently assigned that issue. So whenever Rita fixes that issue, that will get sorted. But no, that needs to be fixed, and you should be able to directly say, I want XYZ CRD encrypted, and that should actually work. Yeah. This is more of just, I don't care what's on my cluster, and I don't know what's secret or not. Please just encrypt it and leave me alone.
Do we support API group wildcards? Or I guess that would just be like wildcard of the kind.
So today I think group resource is annoyingly just a string in the encryption config object, which really annoys me. So I guess we could make it parse it however we want to, wherever we think it's appropriate, as long as it doesn't have ambiguity into what it means. But today we just parse the string into a group resource and directly specify.
Would you want to have an API group / wildcard support?
Oh, like I know all my secrets are over here, kind of deal.
Yeah.
I guess I'm not against it, I guess. And do we support similar semantics in that runtime config thing where you can turn on and off APIs?
There is an all, I think.
You can say all alpha, all beta, all GA, and all.
I don't think the levels necessarily make sense here.
Yeah. The interaction of this with what we publish in terms of encryption config could be interesting, but especially if we start publishing at like the group resource level.
Yes, it's going to be painful. I did point that out as one of the things. I was like, if we support ***, I'm going to have a really long list.
I mean, the server knows what group resources it's serving. So if you have encryption configured for ***, then that means when the server starts serving or stops serving a resource, it needs to evaluate whether it has encryption config for it or not. So like what we publish would be a sort of instantiated, exploded version of this for the particular.
That's what I figured we would have to do, because otherwise clients would have to, like the storage migration controller thing would have to go figure it out itself, which seemed awful.
Yeah.
Since they're not the authority. But so all that aside, I think those are all technically doable. Does anyone object to basically semantic star magic on top of that string field to make it do different things?
Is anyone going to actually do that?
I fully expect, as soon as it's available, for a set of people to do that.
Are we helping them by giving them that shotgun?
It'll make KMS v2 look really attractive, because it should be able to tolerate the absurd load that this would put on a cluster.
I don't know. I'm kind of on the fence. Like, it doesn't offend me. I don't know that I would recommend it or it's high priority. I don't know.
KMS v2 doesn't in itself help with the scalability. I think it helps plugin writers write more scalable plugins, but
and we provide you with a reference implementation, which I still have to review. Christoph, I apologize. I have not forgotten. But yeah, so I think we're significantly putting things in the right place, where writing a bad one is really hard, because it would mean you decide to ignore all the free stuff. Plus, I think Anish did a quick POC that showed that, like, on AKS, it like dramatically reduced the load on Azure Key Vault because the plugin was handling most of the load.
I have to run to another meeting, so I'm sorry. Real quick on the if we're going in reverse order, 111405. I opened that up and it looked like it was proposing like surfacing or letting you target particular encryption providers in annotations or like for particular API objects. That doesn't seem like something we want to do, or at least I wasn't expecting to expose storage level configuration out to particular instances.
Yeah, I agree with that general sentiment, but I don't think Ram is here to defend what he's asking for. but I can try to give some color to this. One of the things that the KMS v2 design implicitly sort of requires is that a KMS plugin like only has one write key. Like in the sense of like what it says its current write key is, it can't have like one per namespace or something. So what Rom was trying to build, it was like a multi-tenant cluster where each tenant was in a namespace, and he wanted different encryption keys for each one. And this is basically one way of trying to wire that through, ignoring how that's done. I pretty strongly don't feel like any of this should ever be surfaced through the Kubernetes API in a way that the user can direct, because like, I don't know what is the behavior if the KMS plugin doesn't exist or you typo the name, like, no.
Yeah,
at
but
core, it is today a KMS plugin can choose to encrypt items in this set of namespaces with this key and that other set of namespaces with that key, and it just works. If you build an API to expose status that doesn't allow that, it would no longer work.
It doesn't work today, David, because you don't know what namespace you're handling. You never see any metadata. You just are told to encrypt a KEK, and you do. Right?
I get the bytes that I'm about to encrypt, as I recall.
You get the bytes of the key encryption key that you're about to encrypt. It has nothing to do with the actual use of it.
Yeah. So like, I'm trying to imagine a use case. You want a namespace level key, maybe controlled by the namespace administrator. And what if the namespace administrator deletes that key? Does that mean that the cluster's broken? Kube API server can't start?
Yeah, again, there's all sorts of weirdness, like, hey, if like one part of the cluster can't find its KMS, like today, that just means nothing works because global lists will fail and the whole thing kind of falls apart. But I guess I want to make sure, David, are you
I don't remember a key encryption key being used in KMS v1. It might be it's been a while. But I thought I remembered hit this endpoint, give it the bytes, get the encrypted bytes back.
Yeah, but the
You
bytes
give it a
are
deck.
always, yeah. Sorry, I might have said the wrong word, but yeah, you never pass any metadata about the object that's going to be encrypted. You just pass in a 128-bit key or something like that and ask for it to be encrypted. So you cannot build this today.
No,
At least not in any standard. Sorry, David, what?
If we can't do it today, I don't see why we would have to do it in KMS v2.
I guess what I'm trying to ask is, do we feel like it's okay to basically make this not a thing that we want to do? Like for example, David Rom works at Red Hat, so like obviously somebody in OpenShift land is going to eventually show up and ask for this in some way, shape, or form.
I don't see if it doesn't work in v1, I don't see a compelling need to do it in a v2 that is solving a different problem. If it worked already, I would want to keep it working, but it doesn't look particularly compelling to me.
I think this is also coming from the TrueSol project, right? Like I think that project, it had to implement this outer tree. So that's why I think Rom is asking, can we consider this for in-tree?
Yeah, I'm not sure what they did there. I don't know if they changed some API server behavior to pass in more data to them or something. And so, I mean, I can try to figure out where they got sort of this multi-tenancy for the KMS thing to see if at least that bit could keep working. Like, for example, because key ID is opaque to the API server, nothing prevents you from like creating a giant JSON blob with like all the mappings and shoving all that through. It's just the API server would be like, oh, rotation is necessary for all objects if any key changes anywhere, because it doesn't know how to do anything per namespace.
So this says multi-KMS, multi-tenancy, multi-cloud, multi-staging scenarios. How does this help?
I can't speak for the multi-cloud, multi-staging bit, but basically what they wanted to do is configure multiple KMS plugins and then like scope them to a namespace somehow in some way, shape, or form. And
So
Yeah.
yeah, you could have one org providing a server, it gets contacted and has its encryption, decryption keys. You have another org providing another one, and if somebody loses the whole data set, and org 1 is loose with their keys and somebody gets it, org 2's stuff isn't impacted. I think I see that much, but
the backups are always handled by the cluster operator, right? So like all this is doing is protecting primarily backups, maybe hard disks for the Cube API servers run. So
yeah, protecting backups isn't nothing.
Sure. So somebody has access to the backups. Org 1 is loose with their keys.
Say the OpenShift CI system, where like, once every year or so, someone loses a key and we cycle the whole thing. If you had the backup and you had that, you'd have a problem. And if you were multi-tenant and you were, I don't know, Cube CI, I'm sure Cube CI has never lost a key, then the Cube CI information in that backup would still be safe.
Yeah, I guess if the cluster operators are responsible for the backups, then shouldn't they also be responsible for the encryption key lifecycle? So what we're saying here is that org 1 is allowed to invalidate backups kind of unilaterally, right? Even if those backups include data for other organizations. So
yeah, I hadn't thought about that. That's a good point.
I will. I'll take a look at the. I'll reply in a comment, and we can discuss further and maybe bring it up next meeting once people have time to look at it.
Yeah, I think this, if this was something we did pursue, it does have significant complexity on any design, just because now you're tracking a thing. And I'm even if we did build it, I just don't know how, like today, any read on any list call for an object means the whole list fails. And it just seems impractical to say that hey, if org 1's KMS is down, the entire cluster is unusable. That's basically what it would mean.
Yeah, I mean, so what if writes start to fail? It just impacts every controller, and if the data is unreadable somewhere, then everything has to be able to handle that. There's a major downstream effect of allowing kind of partially working Cube API servers to function.
Right.
Independent of that, it would be nice if an inability to decrypt one key did not kill my entire list. Haven't figured out how to do that, but
yeah. Do folks have any thoughts around? Well, I mean, I guess I can see what what they managed to do with CAMS v1 to see if I've missed some edge of what's technically possible today, and see if I'm limiting any of that in v2. Because I do agree with you, David, that if some use case is possible with v1, I don't want to lose it in v2, because then v2 is not a replacement for v1.
I would at least wouldn't want to do it accidentally.
Yeah, I guess you can decide the use case is bad, and
we can. And I'm not going to close the door on that, but
Yeah.
So what if we just pass the namespace with the metadata that we send to the plugin?
if this isn't possible today, I wouldn't actually go to the effort of making it possible. I mean, it's, but in terms of that, I mean, I suspect that no matter what you chose as a partitioning mechanism, someone would be unhappy with it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I thought about passing extra metadata. What comes out of that, though, then is the status API has to sort of explode to handle it. So for example, if you decide you want key ID 1 for secrets and key ID 2 for config maps, you have to tell the API server that that's what you want. So it can't just be I pass in extra information to the plugin. Now the plugin has to pass back that information to me. And I'm just like asking every implementation to care about something that like 0.1% might care for, or I mean, making up a number, but yeah, you know, you could pass in group version, resource, and namespace and name. Like you could pass in all 5 identifying things that identify a particular object. I don't know if that's sufficient to what people would want to do with it.
Someone will want an annotation.
Yeah, someone would want an annotation. Someone would want the whole body of the secret so they can do something else.
It sounds like the next thing to do is just make sure this was actually impossible before. And then if it wasn't impossible, come up with good reasons why we would say this is a bad idea. And the one from Mike about if somebody changes this, then you can't restore backup is pretty good. And assess that against just how much you gain by doing it.
Okay. Arita, Anish, is there any other CAMS topics that we want to discuss before we look at the CI stuff?
No, the only other thing was the issue that we have for disallowing multiple KMS providers with the same name. Like the only reason I want to bring that up is it's not a backward compatible change. So if we start validating that, it will break existing users.
Yeah, I guess I can ask that real quick. So today, when you parse the encryption config, we don't validate that the providers have different names. So you can technically configure 2 KMS providers, KMS v1 or v2 providers that write to the same place in etcd effectively, or write with the same prefix. Doesn't sound like a great idea. I mean, presumably, like the way the prefix transformer is written is it won't give up. It'll keep trying until it finds one that runs out of transformers. I asked Jordan about this, and he felt like it was just a bug, and we shouldn't allow that. I think we asked internally in Azure, and we don't. It doesn't matter to us because we always give all KMS plugins unique names based on, I think, the key that's in use. Mike, do you have any sense for if this could impact like GKE? Or?
I would have to look, but I think it would be easy to resolve on a major version, or I guess a minor version change. That would
yeah.
Yeah,
it wouldn't be hard to change. It's more of I wanted to make sure that it wouldn't cause some weirdness that was unexpected.
How did you write mine? Oh.
Yours is correct, David.
Excellent, thank you.
yeah, I don't see a huge problem. It's unfortunate that we can't get get data on it, but
Is this something we want to feature gate maybe?
I mean,
probably not.
I was thinking that if it had an action required release note, that would be sufficient. As in,
Yeah.
at the top of the release notes, if you don't read it, I'm sorry. Please actually read that one section.
Okay.
Yeah, as long as it's really noisy, it just fails QAPS server startup validation. I think that would be fine.
Yeah, it can't lead to data loss or anything like that. It'll just not let you use the server until you fix it.
Sounds okay to me. That's obvious, and people see it when they roll out.
Will it not lead to data loss? What if
So
I
you
have,
would have to rename one of the plugins. So you might have to do storage migration if you want to get that name to be the one that's used on all objects, but you won't lose the ability to read those objects unless you literally take the KMS plugin out of the config.
what if I had two that were the same name
Uh-huh.
and then I swapped the order of them? So some objects are written with the prefix of the first and some objects are written with the prefix of the second. I'd have to do
Yeah,
storage migration
so
before
you
I
might have to
upgrade
do like a storage migration first, I guess, before
with
you
a broken
upgrade.
config
Yeah, so
before I upgrade.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, so before you upgrade, do a storage migration so that the first one in the list is actually the one being used instead of maybe the one being used. And then upgrade. It's also just like a bad place to be in because now you don't know what actually is your right key.
Right. I trust Jordan's intuition on this.
Okay. And again, like the worst, I guess if it really causes disruption, we can undo the validation and come up with some strategy for how to make it okay, I guess. I don't know. Doesn't really seem like you could ever really make it okay. Okay, Rita, did you have anything?
Nope. Sounds good.
Okay. I think we can look at CI if anything's broken on our side.
These look not great.
Why is it always service?
What was that?
Why is it always service accounts?
Because we don't have very many other, we have mostly integration tests. Other than the conformance. All right, so these look fine. These look super noisy. These error messages are not very helpful. Context should support sig-auth default. Is this sig-auth, sig-node? These probably warrant a peek. Most of the test suites were just broken. Failed in 32% of 250 builds. But Prout appears to be down. Oh, never mind. All right, we have one more minute. I'm gonna go figure out if there's an actual issue, and then I'll file a bug.
Okay.
But yeah, I think these look worse than they usually do. So let's
Yeah,
follow
there's
up.
a lot more up and down than I normally remember seeing.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, everyone. See you all in 2 weeks.
Okay.